Let me tell you what I know. The central nervous system takes information from outside of you and gives it to your brain in order to create a picture of what's happening. It's best guess, it's a hallucination, really, vision. Now, vision itself, let me clarify, is not actually what you see, but it is how you connect with the things that you're seeing a representation of. Work through that one again. The colors that you see are your body's interpretation of wavelengths of energy that exists outside of you. And so the senses are both an activity and a physical thing that exists. Sight itself, when you cast your gaze upon something, that's a real thing that's happening. You know what I mean? You're not just pointing eyeballs. Awareness is being funneled from outside of you, through you, onto this reality. And that place where it comes from is the fifth dimension, aka hyperspace. And in a grand scheme, it's actually just a different point on a circle. Because the fifth dimension and the fourth dimension are only as separate as the third dimension and the second dimension. And there are things that can interact with both. And so it's not a here versus there. It's at least not in the sense that they're like, you got to see them as two sides of the same coin. And that goes back to the beginning. There's you and there's that which is outside of you. But the fact of the matter is, there is no difference. There's no separation, because without, an observer, there would be no hallucination. There would be no visual interpretation of energy. And that undeniably exists. We can describe it, we can compare it with other people's. I'm not saying that it's not real. I'm saying that it's not the actual thing that you are using to construct it. And so what is real? Well, when things happen, and it's hard to describe this because everything is real to a degree. But what is really real is God. And God is everything. And so when synchronicities happen, and what a synchronicity is, I'll try to explain. Things are lining up in a way that is maximum pattern clarity. Like dialing through a radio and most of it's fuzz, but then you get to a station and it's crisp, clear music. That is basically what's going on. And the sight what sight actually is basically a multi-dimensional substance that is interactable only in the way that it can A, influence light, and B, use light to create a hologram, basically, within your perception, or maybe that is your perception, that has different colors and different hues. We only really see color, though. That's the thing about it. And so with the other senses, it's the same exact thing. And for those of you who are falling off track, what I'm saying here is the act of looking at something is making a quantum measurement of it. And the only thing you see is light, which are quanta. And so they are affected by the observer. The measurement is the experience. So when you participate in it intentionally, you change focus, you affect it more. You begin actually seeing past it and things and living a more spiritual life, because you then start to wonder about how you're affecting the world around you. And it just works that way. I'm telling you, the more you realize that you have an effect on things, the more likely you are to be spiritual, especially when you sit there and think about it long enough and realize, well, something created the first life form. And if not, then the first life form just came to be on its own, which would make it God. So the universe created us. And you start to see things line up in ways that are synchronous and just have specific meanings to you. Nobody else really can explain it. I mean, unless they've had an experience like that too. But it's scientific. It's think about this. If the if the world is physical, then it must abide to the geometric axioms that hold math to a standard. You know what I'm saying? Like, if shapes themselves function based on rules, then that means things that have those shapes have to function on those rules. So when you look at geometry, you see things like transdimensionality all the time and hyperdimensionality. You see things like, hypercubes and stuff. And it's perfectly describable that way. I mean, if you think about the universe as a 5-dimensional hyperspheric toroid style Klein bottle, where the inside is connected to the outside, and the surface of it is always rotating, always shifting and moving and changing. It's following a pattern, but the bottle also has an inside and an outside, and they're connected. So if you know what those things are, you can visualize it. And it's kind of like a donut. That's the most basic way to put it. And the inside of the donut, aka where the hole is rotating and becoming the outside, as the outside is rotating and becoming the inside. And then you look at the corners and see how they function, and you deduce rules about this. But it's a little more intricate than a donut. But what I'm saying is there's a surface of the donut, there's the inside of the donut where we are. And so we are on the surface of the inside of the donut, headed towards the outside. We'll still be on the surface of it, but we will be in a completely different space. a space with gods and aliens and obelisks, geometries and stuff, like hyperdimensional objects, uh, like Tesseract. And if you've ever done psychedelics, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's just put it that way. And so that is the most recent part of, if it is verifiable, you should be able to look for it and test it. And so, you know, all things have shapes. For something to exist in platonic space, it must have a shape. And so why wouldn't the entirety of the universe have a shape? And, philosophers have thought about this. They've thought it was a dodecahedron. They've thought it was a sphere. I'm sure they've thought it was just about every shape you can imagine. But what I'm saying is that it's a 5-dimensional hypersphere, which explains why more and more people are having mystical experiences, because as we draw closer to the outside, A, they're preparing for us, and B, physically the things are just starting to interact with it, this section of reality, more frequently. And people gotta become aware of this, because if you don't know it's happening, your life is going to be controlled by it. And so what you must do is you must put aside everything you've considered to be life. Put aside social media, put aside television, put aside just about everything for just a minute, and sit there and think about things and deep breathe. Put as much oxygen in your lungs as you can bear to, and close your eyes and let your thoughts wander and try to see what you see, because we are in dire straits. And until we can acknowledge that we're, headed towards a very, very grim future, we're not going to be able to do anything to get out of it. And so we have to look to God. Believe it or not, that's what it ends up being in the long run. Now, I was an atheist most of my life. I mean, I kind of believed in some kind of stuff, but like, when you finally get the picture, you finally get the picture. And so the universe itself is alive, and we need to start treating it as such and keeping everything in mind, as a whole and as individual things. And it will give us the answer of what to do with the fate of the planet. I mean, everybody has their own task. Everybody has their own purpose to try to save this species, but it can be the only focus until things change drastically.